Good morning, everybody. Good morning to everybody that'll watch replay. Everybody's having a good morning or evening. So we're going to talk about Jeffrey Dahmer this morning. Let me wait till some people get in here. I'm a little bit early doing my live stream this morning because I have errands to run today. So thought I'd get an early start. Yesterday, at the end of my video, I forgot to hit the end button. My granny had pulled up with my brother. Anyways, I tried to use the YouTube studio thing to edit my live stream. I've never edited a live stream. Well, I tried to take out the end part where it was just like buffering, and I ended up taking out my whole video except for the end part. Oh, so I had to take it down. It was so annoying. Where's everybody at? Somebody type in the chat so I don't feel alone. And tomorrow, excuse you, lady, she sneezed. Bless you. Tomorrow, I think we'll play some trivia, but I really wanted to do a Dahmer live stream because I have researched Jeffrey Dahmer a lot. I find him very interesting. So I thought we would talk about it this morning. You may hear some rain outside. It's raining pretty hard here. Well, I'm just going to get started. I guess everybody will just have to watch replay. Hey, Giggles, Lisa, Violet, how are you? I'm going to try to say all your name. Well, maybe. Violetendencies, is that how you say that? It's rainy and cold here, Lisa, but good news. My little goat is out of her heat cycle. It only lasts 12 to 36 hours, but she was very hormonal and just kept crying. So yesterday, I went over there and sat with her for a good hour or two, at least an hour and a half. Giggles, I love your little videos you put together. You're so good at that. Hey, Andrew, how are you? So we're going to talk about your favorite person, Andrew, one of your favorite people, Jeffrey Dahmer. We know how much you enjoyed his chocolate making skills in the 80s. Just joking. Andrew hates Jeffrey Dahmer. He's traumatized by Dahmer. Dahmer used to work in a chocolate factory in the 80s, and they made like chocolate Santa Clauses. And Andrew said in the chat one day he used to eat a lot of those in the 80s. So now I poke fun at him. Oh, Giggles, my videos are nothing special. I can't do all that fancy editing and stuff like that. Yeah. If you listen to Jeffrey Dahmer's interviews, he sounded like a smart guy, even almost a likable guy if you didn't know the crimes that he committed. Hey, Alex. Hey, girl. Bella. Hey. Okay, Mel. You need to get ready, Mel. We may play trivia or something tomorrow. If you want to come up, or anybody can. Maybe we can get Lisa up here. She tried last time, but the Harry Butt Bandit messed everything up. He always seems to show up when we're doing trivia or something. Well, thank you, Giggles. That means a lot to me. Thank you. Did y'all see that video I did this morning about the Grinches that tried to steal Christmas? What pieces of crap they are to steal gifts that are meant for foster children, children that can't be with their real families for various reasons. You know, they probably didn't even care. They probably just thought, oh, the foster care agency will buy them more gifts. Feisty Taco. Hey, girl. Love your name. Harry Butt Bandit is an imbecile. Yeah, he is. That guy's obsessed with me. Discovering the truth. Dahmer and Kemper both sounded like good guys. Yeah. Well, they seemed likable to the people that knew them, but they didn't really know them. You know what I mean? Okay, so let's get with it. We're going to go over Dahmer's childhood up until his murders. And for those of you that don't know, Lionel Dahmer actually wrote a book called The Father's Story, I believe. Let me see if I can find. I had some images for us to look at while we're doing this. People probably say, "Oh my God, how can she talk about true crime so early in the morning?" I don't know. I'm obsessed with true crime. Especially, like, I don't know. I'm very interested in serial killers and stuff. Let's see if I can find my recent pictures in my drive. I downloaded a bunch of pictures, I thought. See if I can find them. If not, I'll just have to pull them back up. It's okay. Well, they're not showing in my Google Drive. That is really, really weird. Well, I'm not going to sit here and waste 10 minutes trying to find them. I'll just pull them back up. I hate technology. I just sat and did that for about 10 or 15 minutes. Downloading the pictures and stuff so that we would have them. And now I can't find them. Yeah, serial killers are very interesting, aren't they? Discovering the Truth. Y'all check out Discovering the Truth channel. She does true crime. She's got good videos. Okay. So it should be screen sharing. Okay, so I'm not going to be able to see the chat for just a little bit. Maybe I can still see the chat. If I'm screen sharing, but if I go back, okay. Now I can still see the chat, I think. I'm new to all this. Hey, Remy Pugs. Good morning, y'all. Before I get started, let me just scroll the chat. Someone broke in my lockbox and stole my Xmas gifts. Thank goodness the companies are replacing. Oh my God, Fusty Taco. What the hell is wrong with people? Like, get a job. Buy your own damn Christmas gifts. Kim A, hey, sweetie. I know it's early to be talking about Dahmer Pugs, but we're weirdos here. I am, at least. Okay, so let's get started. So Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin on May 21st, 1960. He was the firstborn son. He has a younger brother. And his father, Lionel Dahmer, got a degree in, he's a chemist. Now, Dahmer's mother battled with mental illness when she was pregnant, after her pregnancy, basically all through her life. But she was on quite a bit of medication. And it's been theorized that that medication could have had some effect on how Jeffrey Dahmer turned out. But anyways, it has been claimed that Jeffrey was deprived of attention as an infant. Other sources, however, suggest that generally Jeffrey was doted upon as an infant and by a toddler by both parents. Although his mother was known to be tense and greedy for both attention and pity, and argumentative with her husband and their neighbors. Now, it was claimed that she never held Jeffrey as a baby, and she wouldn't allow anyone else to hold him. Now, we all know it's very important when you have a newborn baby, to bond with that baby, to hold that baby, to love it, show it affection. Now, this can have effects on kids, even though he was a baby. Okay. Now I lost my place. Okay. As Jeffrey entered first grade, Joyce Dahmer began to spend an increasingly amount of time in bed recovering from a weakness. Lionel's university studies kept him away from the home much of the time. When he was home, his wife demanded constant attention. Isn't that funny? That's what Jeffrey Dahmer wanted too. Attention from dead people, of course. She reportedly worked herself into a state of anxiety over trivial matters simply to appease her husband. On one occasion, Joyce Dahmer attempted suicide from an overdose of Aquanal pills, I don't know what that is, to which she had become addicted. Consequently, neither parent devoted much time to their son. Jeffrey was described as being an energetic and happy child until he became notably subdued after undergoing a double hernia surgery, which was performed shortly before his fourth birthday. He recalled his earlier years of family life as being extreme tension, which he noted was between his parents, whom he observed to be constantly arguing with each other. At elementary school, Jeffrey was quiet and very timid, and he really didn't interact much. On his first grade report card, one teacher described Dahmer as a reserved child whom she since felt neglected. This teacher did note that this sense of neglect seemed to stem from his mother's illnesses. Now, I have to think to myself, was Joyce Dahmer really sick? Or was Joyce Dahmer a hypochondriac that just always, thought she had some kind of illness, always taking some kind of pill? Maybe because they said she liked attention. Hey, Linda. Is that a Quaalude? Feisty Taco? Is that what that pill meant? I couldn't hardly pronounce the daggone name. I'd never heard of that. But I know what a Quaalude is. I've heard that Quaaludes, my mom told me that they were kind of like a pain pill and a nerve pill combined. Gets even more interesting, Feisty Taco. It is sad. It is sad. Unfortunately, I think that his parents had a lot to do with the way that he turned out, of course. Okay, let's see. From a very early age, Jeffrey manifested an interest in dead animals. Friends later recalled Jeffrey initially collected large insects, such as dragonflies and butterflies, which he placed inside jars. Later, he collected animal carcasses from the roadside. Occasionally accompanied by one or more of his few friends, he dismembered these animals either at home or in the woods behind the family home. According to one friend, Dahmer dismembered these animals and stored the parts in jars in the family's tool shed, always explaining that he was curious as to how each animal fitted together. He was curious about the insides of animals. Something happened to Jeffrey from the time he was a kid till he was a teenager, because Jeffrey was not always like that with animals. When he was very young, I believe they moved from Milwaukee to Ohio. Jeffrey had a dog named Frisky, and he loved that dog. So what happened in Jeffrey's mind from the time he was little till he got to a teen? At least Jeffrey was remorseful when he got caught. I do believe that in a way he was glad that he was caught, Linda. Jeffrey Dahmer thought that he was the devil. We'll get into all that here in a minute. Okay. In one instance, he decapitated the carcass of a dog before nailing the animal's body to a tree. He later impaled the skull of this dog upon a stake beside a wooden cross in the woods behind his home. Jeffrey's fascination with dead animals might have begun when, at the age of 4, he noted his father removing animal bones from beneath the family home. According to Jeffrey's father, Lionel, his son was oddly thrilled by the sounds of the bones that they made when they were getting the animal bones from out from underneath the house, I believe. And Jeffrey was just amazed by the sound that the bones made when they dropped them into the bucket. That's what it says. According to Lionel Dahmer, his son was oddly thrilled by the sounds the bones made and instantly developed a fixation for playing with and collecting animal bones. He occasionally searched beneath and around the family's home for additional bones. With live animals, he explored their bodies to discover where their bones were located. In October 1966, the Dahmer family relocated to Doylestown, Ohio. At the time, Joyce Dahmer was pregnant with her second child. When she gave birth to a baby boy on December 18, 1966, Jeffrey was allowed to choose the name for the baby. He chose the name David for his younger brother. The same year, Lionel Dahmer achieved his degree and subsequently obtained employment as an analytical chemist in the city of Akron, Ohio. I'm making sure I pronounced that right. Analytical something. He was a damn chemist, y'all. Okay. In 1968, the family relocated to Bath, Ohio. 2 years later, over a family meal of chicken, Jeffrey asked his father what would happen if bones of the chicken were placed in bleach solution. Lionel Dahmer, by this stage, he was concerned his elder son's lethargic attitude and his solitary existence. Therefore, he was delighted that Jeffrey had became interested in what he thought was taxidermy. Because Jeffrey was kind of, as a kid, he was outgoing, but as he got into like preteen and teenage years, he became very withdrawn. Okay. So Lionel basically just believed this was scientific curiosity when he asked about the bleaching of the bones. So Lionel willingly demonstrated to his son how to safely bleach and later preserve animal bones. Jeffrey used this knowledge regarding the cleansing and preserving of the bones on many of the animal remains, which he continued to collect. From his freshman year at high school, Dahmer was seen by his peers as an outcast with few friends. Many of Jeffrey's classmates later recollected being disturbed by the fact that he drank both beer and hard alcohol, which he smuggled into school inside the lining of his army jacket, and he concealed it in his locker. This drinking occurred before, during, and after school, and was first noted when Dahmer was 14 years old. On one occasion, a classmate observed Dahmer consuming a cup of gin and asked him why he was drinking liquor in class, to which Dahmer casually replied, "It's my medicine." In his freshman year, Dahmer, although largely uncommunicative, was observed by staff to be a polite student who was known to be highly intelligent. He initially achieved on average grades, which staff attributed to his apathy. What's that mean? Apathy. I don't know what that word means. I'll have to look that up. He was also known to be a keen tennis player and to have briefly played in the high school band. Well, I didn't know that. I didn't know he played tennis, and I didn't know he was in the high school band. Once Dahmer reached puberty, Jeffrey discovered he was gay. He did not divulge his sexual orientation to his parents. In his early teens, he did engage in a brief relationship with another youth, although the pair never had intercourse. By his later admission, he began sexually fantasizing about dominating and controlling a completely submissive male partner. These fantasies gradually became intertwined with dissection. I was just looking at y'all's chat. Lisa, I always look differently at people who are mean to animals. Yeah, if people are mean to animals, that is a good sign of damn killer. Okay. On one occasion, when Dahmer was 16 years old, Jeffrey conceived a rape fantasy, rendering an unconscious a particular male jogger he found attractive, and then making sexual use of his unconscious body. To render the man unconscious, Jeffrey concealed himself in the bushes on the route he noted the jogger took, baseball bat in hand, and he lay in wait for the jogger to run by. The jogger did not pass on that particular day. However, Jeffrey never attempted this plan again. He later stated this was his first attempt to attack another individual. Despite being regarded as a loner and an oddball among his peers, Jeffrey became something of a class clown among some students due to the pranks he regularly staged, some of which were done to amuse his classmates, others apparently to simply attract attention. Here we are with the word attention again. It seemed like Joyce Dahmer and Jeffrey lived for attention. That's all they thought about. These pranks became known as doing a Dahmer and included him acting like he was having an epileptic seizure, acting like he had cerebral palsy, knocking over items at school and at local stores. By 1977, Jeffrey's grades had declined. His alcohol abuse had increased, and he had very few interactions with his peers. His parents hired a private tutor for him, but the tutor only had limited success. The same year, Dahmer's parents attended counseling sessions to try to resolve personal differences and thus save their marriage. The counseling was ultimately unsuccessful, and they decided to divorce, although initially on amicable grounds. Both of Dahmer's parents began to quarrel frequently in the presence of their sons, and in early 1978, Lionel moved out of the house. Now, I have heard that when these arguments were going on between Lionel and Joyce, Jeffrey Dahmer would take a baseball bat out into the woods and just beat on a tree. It's pretty clear that his parents done a lot of, I guess, how would you say that, psychological damage to Jeffrey with all the arguing and, his mother sleeping all the time, being sick all the time. Okay. So Jeffrey Dahmer graduated from high school in May 1978. A few weeks before his graduation, one of his teachers observed Jeffrey sitting close to the school parking lot, drinking several cans of beer. When the teacher threatened to report the matter, Jeffrey informed him he was experiencing a lot of problems at home, and the school guidance counselor was aware of them. Shortly after this incident, Joyce was awarded custody of her younger son and vacated the family residence, moving in with family members of hers. Jeffrey, having just turned 18, legally an adult, and therefore not subject to court custodial considerations, he stayed in the house. So she just left her son there. In 1978, in the summer of 1978, Jeffrey Dahmer, at the age of 18, 3 weeks after his graduation, committed his first murder. He murdered Stephen Hicks. And as I said, at this time he was living alone in the home. And Lionel Dahmer was living in a nearby motel. And he was unaware that Joyce had left and went to Wisconsin with the younger brother, David. But on June 18th, Jeffrey picked up a hitchhiker named Stephen Mark Hicks, who was 4 days shy of his 19th birthday. Jeffrey lured the young guy to his house, promising that they could drink together and smoke weed together. Hicks, who had been hitchhiking to a rock concert in Lockwood Corners, agreed to go back to Jeffrey Dahmer's house. According to Dahmer, after several hours of drinking and listening to music, Hicks wanted to leave, and Jeffrey said, "I didn't want him to go." In response, Jeffrey bludgeoned him to death with a 10-pound dumbbell. Jeffrey later stated he struck Hicks twice from behind with the dumbbell as Hicks sat upon a chair. When Hicks fell unconscious, Dahmer strangled him to death with the bar of the dumbbell, then stripped the clothes from Hicks' body before masturbating as he stood above the corpse. The following day, Dahmer dissected Hicks's body in the basement. He later buried the remains in a shallow grave in the backyard. But several weeks later, unearthing the remains and paring the flesh from the bones. Damn, it's hard to read. So he buried Stephen in the backyard, and a couple of weeks later, he dug him up and began cutting the flesh from his body. He dissolved the flesh in acid before flushing the solution down the toilet. He crushed the bones with a sledgehammer and scattered them in the woodland behind the family's home. 6 weeks after the murder of Hicks, Dahmer's father and his fiancée returned to his home, where they discovered Jeffrey living alone at the house. That August, Jeffrey enrolled at Ohio State University, hoping to major in business. His time at college was completely unproductive. He was a very bad alcoholic at this time. He received failing grades in the Introduction to Anthropology, Classical Civilization, and Administrative Science. The only course Dahmer was successful at was riflery. He received a B grade. His overall GPA was 4.45/4.0. On one occasion, Lionel Dahmer paid a surprise visit to his son, only to find his room full of empty liquor bottles. Despite his father having paid in advance for a second term at college, Jeffrey dropped out of the university after 3 months. And in January 1979, at the urging of his father, Jeffrey Dahmer enlisted in the U.S. Army, where he trained as a medical specialist at Fort Sam, Houston, and San Antonio, Texas. In July 1979, he was stationed in West Germany, where he served as a combat medic. According to published reports, Dahmer's first year of service, he was an average or slightly above average soldier. But that wouldn't last long because Jeffrey Dahmer was an alcoholic. So he was honorably discharged from the Army. Now, it has been said that Dahmer did rape, I think, 2 soldiers during his time in the Army. However, Dahmer never admitted to this. And I'm not saying that those guys are lying. I would never want to say someone's lying about rape. But Jeffrey Dahmer admitted to all the murders. He even told them about Stephen Hicks, who they had no idea that Jeffrey Dahmer had even murdered. So why wouldn't he tell them about raping the guys? I mean, I don't know. Oh, yeah. Thanks, Pugs. They didn't have that part in here that I'm reading. Yeah, when Jeffrey actually was taking the rest of the remains to the trash dump, he got pulled over by the cops. And he lied, as he'd done all of his life. He told them, his parents was having a divorce. He was just going to the dump to clear his mind. Then I think that's when he turned around. He got scared. The cop let him go. He turned around and went home and was crushing the bones and stuff, I think. Excuse me. Okay. Now I've lost my place. So after he was discharged from the Army, they gave Dahmer a plane ticket, and on March 24th, 1981, Dahmer was sent to Fort Jackson, South Carolina for debriefing, provide the plane ticket to travel anywhere in the country. Jeffrey later told police he felt he could not return home to face his father, so he opted to travel to Miami Beach, Florida, both because he was tired of the cold and in an attempt to live by his own means. In Florida, Dahmer found employment and he rented a room in a nearby hotel. Dahmer spent most of his salary on alcohol, and he was soon evicted from the motel for non-payment. He initially spent his evenings on the beach as he continued to work at the sandwich shop until phoning his father and asking to return to Ohio in September of that same year. After his return to Ohio, Jeffrey initially stayed with his father and stepmother and insisted on being delegated numerous chores to occupy his time. Oh, they insisted on Dahmer doing chores. He just couldn't sit around and drink. They have some of this worded weird. But Jeffrey continued to drink heavily. In 2 weeks after his return, Jeffrey was arrested for drunk and disorderly conduct, for which he was fined $60 and given suspended jail sentence, 10 days. Lionel Dahmer tried unsuccessfully to wean his son off alcohol. In December 1981, Lionel and his wife sent Jeffrey to live with his grandmother in West Allis, Wisconsin. Jeffrey's grandmother was the only family member to whom he displayed any affection. They hoped that her influence would change Jeffrey and might inspire him to refrain from drinking alcohol, maybe find a job, and live responsibly. Initially, living with his grandma worked. They were very harmonious together. He accompanied her to church. He did chores for her. He looked for jobs. And he abided by most of her house rules, although he did continue to drink and smoke. This new influence in his life initially brought results. In early 1982, Jeffrey found employment as a phlebotomist at Milwaukee's Blood Plasma Center. He held this job for a total of 10 months before being laid off. He remained unemployed for over 2 years, during which he lived upon whatever money his grandmother would give him. Shortly before losing his job, Jeffrey was arrested for indecent exposure. On August 7, 1982, at a Wisconsin State Fair park, Dahmer was observed to expose himself to a crowd of 25 women and children. For this incident, he was convicted and fined $50. In January 1985, Dahmer was hired as a mixer at the Milwaukee and Ambrosia Chocolate Factory, where he worked from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., 6 nights per week, with Saturday evenings off. Shortly after Jeffrey found this employment, an incident occurred in which he was propositioned by another man while sitting reading in the West Allis Public Library. The stranger threw Dahmer a note offering to perform oral sex with him. Dahmer did not respond to this proposition. The incident stirred in his mind the fantasies of control and dominance he had developed as a teenager, and he began to familiarize, I can't say that name, himself with he started going to the gay bars. He would go to bookstores, gay bathhouses. He also stole a male mannequin from a store, which he briefly used for sexual stimulation until his grandmother discovered the item stowed in a closet and demanded he discard it. He also had a skull stored in that closet in a box that was locked. His dad's old chemist box. By 1985, Jeffrey had begun to frequent the gay bathhouses, which he later described as being relaxing places. But during his sexual encounters, he became frustrated at his partners moving during the sexual act. So he didn't want someone that was alive. He wanted them to be like a corpse. Following his arrest, he stated, "I trained myself to view people as objects of pleasure instead of as people." For this reason, beginning in June 1986, he administered sleeping pills to his partners, giving them liquor laced with sedatives, then raping their unconscious bodies. After approximately 12 such instances, the bathhouse's administration revoked Jeffrey Dahmer's membership, and he began to use hotel rooms to continue this practice. Shortly after the membership of the bathhouse was revoked, Jeffrey read a report in a newspaper regarding the upcoming funeral of an 18-year-old male. He conceived the idea of stealing the freshly laid corpse, taking it home. According to Dahmer, he attempted to dig up the coffin, the body, from the ground, but the ground was frozen, so he had to abandon that plan. In August 1986, Jeffrey was arrested for masturbating in front of two 12-year-old boys as he stood close to the, oh my gosh, I can't pronounce this, close to a river. Jeffrey initially admitted the offense and was again charged with indecent exposure, but quickly changed his story and claimed he had merely been urinating, unaware there were any witnesses. The charge was changed to disorderly conduct, and on March 10, 1987, Jeffrey was sentenced to 1 year of probation. With additional instructions, he was to undergo counseling. But on November 20th, 1987, Dahmer, at the time residing with his grandmother, encountered a 25-year-old man from Michigan. I hope I say this name right, Stephen Tuomi, something like that, at a bar and pursued him to the Ambassador Hotel in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where Dahmer had rented a room for the evening. According to Dahmer, he had no intentions of murdering him. Hold on a minute, I lost my place, y'all. He had no intentions of murdering him, but rather intended to drug and rape him as he lay unconscious. The following morning, however, he awoke to find Stephen lying beneath him on the bed, his chest crushed in. He was black and blue with bruises. Blood was also seeping from the corner of his mouth. Jeffrey's fist and one forearm was extremely bruised. Jeffrey stated he had no memory of killing him and later informed investigators that he could not believe this had happened. To dispose of the body, he purchased a large suitcase in which he transported the body to his grandmother's residence. There, 1 week later, he severed the heads, arms, and legs from the torso, then filleted the bones from the body before cutting the flesh into pieces small enough to handle. He then placed the flesh inside plastic garbage bags. He wrapped the bones inside a sheet and pounded them into splinters with a sledgehammer. The entire dismemberment process took Jeffrey approximately 2 hours to complete, and he disposed of all the remains, excluding the severed head, in the trash. For a total of 2 weeks, Jeffrey retained the victim's head wrapped in a blanket. After 2 weeks, Jeffrey boiled the head in a mixture of, what is that, salicylic and alkali-based industrial detergent and bleach in an effort to retain the skull, which he then used to masturbate with. He used the skull to masturbate with. Eventually, the skull was rendered too brittle by the bleaching process, so Dahmer pulverized and disposed of it. Miss Lady, hey y'all. Andrew, I like my girlfriend's ex to be like a corpse. Oh, Lord, Andrew, don't say that. I mean, Jeffrey really had a lot going on in his sick mind. And I've heard doctors talk about how when he started going through puberty and, realized that he was gay, that really had a big, big effect on him. It kind of like intertwined, plus his fascination with dead stuff. Sick. I like listening to the professionals talk about Dahmer. Okay. 2 months after he murdered Stephen, Dahmer encountered a 14-year-old Native American male prostitute, James Dox Tater, something like that. I've heard these names a million times, and I get on here and I can't pronounce them. Let me light my cigarette, y'all. Oh, yeah, and they also said, a doctor said that Jeffrey's first murder of the Hicks guy traumatized him forever. Okay. So 2 months after the murder of Stephen, he encountered a 14-year-old Native American male prostitute. Now, Jeffrey had a specific type that he liked. He liked guys with darker skin. He liked African Americans, Latin men, and he liked men that had a lean body, long legs, kind of athletic. Oh, pugs, I'd say any of the victims' mothers, they probably have not recovered still to this day from what he did. I mean, if that was my son, I don't think I'd want to hear the details. I guess you didn't have no choice. Okay. Dahmer lured the youth to his home with an offer of $50 to pose for nude photos. Now, I believe he met this guy at a shoe store. So they went back to Dahmer's West Allis residence. The pair engaged in sexual activity before Dahmer drugged James and strangled him on the floor of the cellar. Now, this was at his grandmother's house. Dahmer left the body in the cellar for a week before dismembering it, the same way he had done the previous one. He placed all the remains, including the skull, in the trash. He boiled the skull and initially retained it before pulverizing it. Then in March 1988, March 24th to be exact, Dahmer met another bisexual man, Richard Guerrero, outside a gay bar called the Phoenix. Dahmer lured Richard to his grandmother's residence. Although the incentive on this occasion was $50 to simply spend the remainder of the night with him, he then drugged him with sleeping pills and strangled him with a leather strap, with Dahmer then performing oral sex upon the corpse. Richard's body was dismembered within 24 hours of his murder, with the remains again disposed of in the trash and the skull again retained before being pulverized several months later. On April 23rd, Jeffrey lured another man to his house. However, after giving the victim a drugged coffee, both he and the victim heard Dahmer's grandmother call, "Is that you, Jeff?" Although Dahmer replied in a manner that led his grandmother to believe he was alone, his grandmother did observe that Jeffrey was not alone. Because of this, Jeffrey opted not to kill this particular victim, instead waiting until he had become unconscious before taking him to the county general hospital. In September 1988, Jeffrey's grandmother asked him to move out of her house because of his habits of bringing young men to her house late at night and the foul smell coming from the basement and the garage. So Jeffrey found a one-bedroom apartment on North 25th Street and moved into his new residence on September 25th. The following day, Dahmer was arrested for drugging and sexually fondling a 13-year-old boy whom he lured to his home on the pretext of posing for nude photographs. In January of 1989, Jeffrey was convicted of that. It was second-degree sexual assault and enticing a child for immoral purposes. Sentencing for the assault was suspended until May 1989. On March 20th, Dahmer commenced on a 10-day Easter absence from work, during which he moved back into his grandmother's home. I didn't know that. I didn't know that he moved back into his grandmother's home after he moved out. I didn't think he went back there again. Learn something new every day. 2 months after his conviction and 2 months prior to his sentencing for the sexual assault, Jeffrey murdered his fifth victim. He was a mixed-race 24-year-old aspiring model named Anthony Sears, whom Dahmer met at a gay bar on March 25, 1989. According to Jeffrey, on this particular occasion, he was not looking to commit a crime. However, shortly before closing time that evening, Sears just started talking to me, Jeffrey said. Dahmer lured Sears to his grandmother's home, where the pair engaged in oral sex before Dahmer drugged and strangled him. Following morning, Jeffrey placed the corpse in his grandmother's bathtub, where he decapitated the body before attempting to flay the corpse. He then stripped the flesh from the body and pulverized the bones, which were again disposed of in the trash. According to Jeffrey, he found Sears exceptionally attractive, and Sears was the first victim from whom he prematurely retained any body parts. He preserved Sears' head and his genitals in acetone. and stored them in his work locker. When he moved to a new address the following year, he took the remains there. God, he was sick, wasn't he? Thank you, Linda. Sorry, I've not been looking at y'all's comments. Okay. Okay. March 23rd, 1989. Jeffrey Dahmer was sentenced to 5 years probation, 1 year in the House of Correction with work release permitted in order that he be able to keep his job. He was also required to register as a sex offender. 2 months before his scheduled release from the work camp, Jeffrey was paroled from this regimen. His 5 years probation imposed in 1989 began at this point. On release, Jeffrey temporarily moved back to his grandmother's home before, in May 1990, moving into the Oxford Apartments located on North 25th Street in Milwaukee. Although located in a high-crime area, the apartment was close to his workplace, was furnished, and with $300 a month rent, it included the electricity. So, in May 14th, 1990, Dahmer moved out of his grandmother's house into 924 North 25th Street apartment 213, taking Anthony Sears' mummified head and genitals with him. Within 1 week of moving into this new apartment, Jeffrey killed his sixth victim, Raymond Smith. Raymond was a 32-year-old male prostitute who Dahmer lured to pills and manually strangled him. The following day, Jeffrey purchased a Polaroid camera and he took several pictures of Smith's body in suggestive positions before dismembering him in the bathroom. He boiled the legs, arms, and pelvis in a steel kettle with Solex, which allowed him to then rinse off the remainders of Smith's skeleton, including the skull, in a container filled with acid. Dahmer later spray painted Smith's skull, which he placed alongside the skull of Anthony Sears upon a black towel inside a metal filing cabinet. Let me see if I can pull up some of Jeffrey's victims. So we can look at all the victims he killed. He killed so many men. And this is probably not even all of them. Okay. Okay, I lost my place. Okay. Approximately 1 week after the murder of Raymond Smith, on or about May 27th, Jeffrey lured another man to his apartment. On this occasion, however, Jeffrey himself accidentally consumed the laced drink that had sedatives intended to be consumed by his guest. When he awoke the following day, he discovered his intended victim had stolen several items of his clothing, $300, and a watch. Jeffrey never reported the incident to the police, although on May 29th, he divulged to his probation officer that he had been robbed. Jeffrey's next victim, Edward Smith. In June 1990, Dahmer lured 27-year-old acquaintance named Edward Smith to his apartment. He drugged and strangled him. Yeah, I know, my dog just yawned. On this occasion, rather than immediately getting rid of the skeleton, repeating the process of bleaching, Um, Dahmer placed Smith's skeleton in his freezer for several months in hope it would not retain moisture. Freezing the skeleton did not remove moisture, and the skeleton of his victim would become acidified several months later. Jeffrey accidentally destroyed the skull when he placed it in the oven to dry, a process that caused the skull to explode. Jeffrey himself was to later inform the police he had felt rotten about Smith's murder as he had been unable to retain any of the parts of his body. So I'm trying. There's like so many victims, guys. I'm trying to scroll here. By 1991, fellow residents of the Oxford apartments had repeatedly complained to the manager of a foul smell coming from apartment 213, in addition to sounds of falling objects and occasional sounds of a chainsaw. The apartment manager, Prince Will, did contact Jeffrey in response to these complaints, and on several occasions, although Dahmer initially excused the odors coming from his apartment as being caused by his freezer breaking, causing the contents to become spoiled, on later occasions he informed Prince Will that the reasons for the odor was that several of his tropical fish had recently died, and that he would take care of this matter. As Jeffrey's killings increased, Jeffrey got it in his head that he wanted to have a sex slave. So in May 26, 1991, Jeffrey encountered a 14-year-old named Conrad Cynthia some phone or something on Wisconsin Avenue. He approached the youth with an offer of money to accompany him to his apartment to pose for Polaroid pictures. According to Dahmer, Conrad, let's see, hold on, I lost my place. Oh, yeah. According to Dahmer, Conrad, the younger brother of the boy whom he had molested. So this is the younger brother of the boy Dahmer molested and got in trouble with in 1988. He was initially reluctant to the proposal before changing his mind and accompanying Jeffrey Dahmer to his apartment, where the youth posed for 2 pictures in his underwear before Dahmer drugged him into unconsciousness and performed oral sex on him. On this occasion, Jeffrey drilled a single hole into his skull, through which he injected hydrochloric acid into the frontal lobe. Before the boy fell unconscious, Dahmer led the boy into his bedroom, where the body of 31-year-old Tony Hughes, whom Dahmer had killed 3 days earlier, lay naked on the floor. According to Dahmer, he believed the boy saw the body, yet did not react to seeing the bloated corpse, likely because of the effects of the sleeping pills he had ingested and the hydrochloric acid Dahmer had injected in his skull. He soon became unconscious, whereupon Dahmer drank several beers while lying alongside him before leaving his apartment to get some beer. But this was a mistake because the boy got out of the apartment. In the early morning hours of May 27th, Dahmer returned towards his apartment to discover the boy sitting outside naked on the corner with 3 distressed young women standing near him. Dahmer approached the trio and explained to the woman that he was his friend and attempted to lead him back to the apartment by his arm. The 3 women did not believe Dahmer, so they called 911. And on arrival of the two officers, they felt nothing was wrong. They went up to the apartment. Of course, they didn't go through the apartment. Jeffrey showed them Polaroids that they had took during the evening. He claimed that was his lover. So they believed him, and they left. If they had done a background check on Jeffrey Dahmer, it would have been revealed that he was a convicted child molester under probation. As soon as the officers left, he strangled him to death. And he did keep the skulls from both bodies at that time. Now, we're going to get to Jeffrey Dahmer's arrest. We know he's got tons and tons of victims. We're going to skip to July 15th. On July 15th, Jeffrey encountered 24-year-old Oliver Lacey. Lacey agreed to Dahmer's ruse of posing for photographs and accompanied him to his apartment, where the pair engaged in sexual activity before Dahmer drugged Lacey. On this occasion, Dahmer intended to prolong the time he spent with Lacey while alive. After unsuccessfully attempting to render him unconscious with chloroform, he phoned his workplace to request a day's absence. This was granted, although the next day he was suspended. After strangling Lacey, Dahmer had sex with the corpse before dismembering him. And I just want to say something. Dahmer didn't like anal sex. I hate even saying that. Dahmer didn't like anal sex. He would prefer to light sex that's just rubbing on the body and things like that. Hard sex was anal sex, but he did not like that. And Dahmer didn't want to have to please his victims. That's why he wanted them unconscious, dead corpses. I had a dog scratching on the door. Now she's left. So, let me just open the door. Sorry, guys. Every time I try to do a serious live stream, I get interrupted. Okay. So, okay, after he strangled Lacey, Dahmer had sex with the corpse before dismembering him. He placed Lacey's head and heart in the refrigerator and his skeleton in the freezer. 4 days later, on July 19th, Jeffrey received word that he was fired. Upon receipt of this news, Dahmer lured 25-year-old Joseph Bradehoff to his apartment. Joseph was strangled and left lying on Dahmer's bed, covered with a sheet for 2 days. On July 25th, Dahmer removed these sheets to find the head covered in maggots, whereupon he decapitated the body, cleaned the head, and placed it in the refrigerator. He later acidified the torso along with 2 other victims he had killed within the previous month. So we're going to get to his capture here. He just killed so many people that I just can't go through all of them. I don't got time right now. Okay, so we're going to go to his capture. On July 22nd, 1991, Jeffrey approached 3 men with the offer of $100 to accompany him to his apartment to pose for nudes, drink beer, and simply keep him company. One of the trio, 32-year-old Tracy Edwards, agreed to accompany him to his apartment. Upon entering Dahmer's apartment, he noted a foul odor and several boxes of hydrochloric acid on the floor, which Dahmer claimed he used for cleaning bricks. What kind of excuse is that? Cleaning bricks. After some minor conversation, Edwards responded to Dahmer's request to turn his head and view his tropical fish, whereupon Jeffrey placed a handcuff upon his wrist. When Edwards asked what's happening, Jeffrey unsuccessfully attempted to cuff his wrists together, then told Edwards to accompany him to his bedroom to pose for nude pictures. While inside the bedroom, Edwards noted a nude male posters on the wall and that a videotape of The Exorcist was playing. Okay, I'm going to stop for a minute because I did learn something about this movie, The Exorcist. Every time Dahmer lured victims to his apartment, he had the movie The Exorcist playing on a VHS tape. Isn't that strange? Can you imagine the smell? I mean, I've smelled a dead animal. You'll be like walking the dog and you get this bad, bad smell. There's an animal, out in the woods dead, and it is very strong. So could you imagine being inside a small apartment? It's had all these dead bodies in it. Still got dead bodies in it. Yes, Linda, really. Every time that he got him up there to his apartment, he had the Exorcist movie playing. Okay. Edwards also noted a blue 57-gallon drum in the corner from which a strong odor was coming from. Dahmer then pulled out a knife and informed Edwards he intended to take nude pictures of him. In an attempt to appease Dahmer, Edwards unbuttoned his shirt, saying he would allow him to do so if he would remove the handcuffs and put the knife away. In response to this promise, Dahmer simply turned his attention towards the TV. Edwards observed Dahmer rocking back and forth and chanting before turning his attention back to him. He placed his head on Edwards' chest, listening to his heartbeat, and with the knife pressed against his intended victim, informed Edwards he intended to eat his heart. Edwards, in a contentious attempts to prevent Jeffrey from attacking him, Edwards repeated that he was Jeffrey's friend and that he was not going to run away. Edwards had decided he was either going to jump from a window or run through an unlocked front door upon the next available opportunity. When Edwards next stated he needed to use the bathroom, he asked if they could sit and drink a beer in the living room where there was air conditioning, to which Jeffrey consented, and the pair walked into the living room when Edwards exited the bathroom. Inside the living room, Edwards waited until he observed Jeffrey have a momentary lapse of concentration again. When Edwards rose from he asked to use the bathroom again. Then he rose from the couch. He noted Dahmer was not holding the handcuffs, whereupon Edwards punched Dahmer in the face, knocking him off balance, and ran out the door. At 11:30 p.m., July 22nd, Edwards flagged down the Milwaukee police officers at the corner of North 25th Street. The officers noted Edwards had a handcuff attached to his wrist. Edwards explained to the officers that a freak had placed handcuffs upon him and asked if the police could remove them. When the officers' handcuff keys failed to fit the brand of handcuffs, Edwards agreed to accompany the officers back to the apartment, where Edwards stated he had previously spent 5 hours before escaping. When the officers and Edwards arrived at the apartment 213, Dahmer invited the trio inside and acknowledged he had indeed placed the handcuffs upon Edwards, although he offered an explanation as to why he had done so. At this point, Edwards divulged to the officers that Dahmer had also pulled out a knife upon him and that this had happened in the bedroom. Dahmer made no comment, indicating to one of the officers that the key to the handcuffs was beside the dresser in the bedroom. As the officer entered the bedroom, Dahmer attempted to pass another officer the key. Oh, he tried to get the officer to let him get the key. And the officer told him to back off. The other officer did find a large knife in the bedroom beneath the bed. He also saw an unopened drawer, which upon closer inspection contained Polaroids, many of which were human bodies in various states of dismemberment. Officer Mueller noted the decor indicated they had been taken in that very apartment in which they were standing. He walked into the living room to show them to his partner, uttering the words, "These are for real." When Dahmer saw what the officer was holding, Dahmer saw the officer was holding several of his Polaroids, he fought with the officers in an effort to resist arrest. The officers overpowered him, cuffed his hands behind his back, and called a second squad car for backup. At this point, Officer Mueller opened the refrigerator to reveal a freshly severed head on a black male at the bottom shelf. Let me hold on, guys, a second. Sorry, my hubby's in there rattling damn chicken feed bags. Jesus. Okay. So when the officer opened the refrigerator and saw the head, the officer actually heard someone scream. He was like so shocked by what he seen, he didn't realize it was his own self screaming. What happened, Katie? I didn't see. I have not been watching the drama on YouTube. You can message me and tell me. Okay, so we know that investigators arrested Dahmer. He was charged with the murder of all these men. He was convicted, of course. And it says, in the early hours of June 23rd, 1991, Jeffrey was questioned by Detective Patrick Kennedy as to the murders he had committed and the evidence found at his apartment. Over the following 2 weeks, Kennedy and later Detective Patrick Murphy conducted numerous interviews with Dahmer, which, when combined, totaled over 60 hours. Dahmer waived his right to have a lawyer present throughout his interrogations, adding he wished to confess all he had created, created this horror, and it only makes sense. I do everything to put an end to it. He readily admitted to having murdered 16 young men in Wisconsin since 1987, with one further victim, Stephen Hicks, killed in Ohio back in 1978. Hey, Verbal, how are you? It's good to see you. I hope you're doing well. Dahmer readily admitted to performing necrophilia with several of his victims' bodies, including performing sexual acts on them, as he dismembered their bodies in the bathtub. Having noted that much of the blood pooled inside the victim's chest after death, Dahmer first removed the internal organs, then suspended the torso so the blood drained to his bathtub, before dicing any organs he did not wish to retain and paring the flesh from the body. The bones he wished to dispose of were pulverized or acidified with salicylic acid and bleach solutions. Oh, lost my place. I had a message. In addition, he confessed to having consumed the hearts, livers, biceps, and portions of the thighs of several victims killed within the previous year. And according to Dahmer, he ate the organs, the biceps, and stuff so that his victims could forever be with him. They could be a part of him. Dahmer was trying to make this sick altar in his house. I believe it was supposed to be above his bed, made out of skulls, bones from his victims. I mean, this man, he really had a sick, sick mind. And he knew he had a sick mind. If you watch the interviews with Jeffrey Dahmer, to me, I took it as he didn't want to be a monster, a killer. But he knew he was a monster. He referred to himself as the devil. Oh, it's very interesting, Lisa. If I went through all the victims, Jeffrey would be here freaking all day. That's why I kind of had to. We know he basically did the same thing to almost all of his victims. Okay. When asked as to why he preserved a total of 7 skulls and the entire skeletons of 2 victims, Jeffrey stated he had been in the process of constructing a private altar of victim skulls, which he intended to display on the black table located in his living room. Oh, okay. My bad. I thought he was trying to make an altar in his bedroom. I guess it don't matter which room it's in, it's sick. Upon which he had photographed the bodies of many victims. This display of skulls was to be adored at each side with the complete skeletons of Ernest Miller and Oliver Lacey. The 4 severed heads found in the kitchen were to be removed of all flesh and used in this altar, as was the skull of at least one future victim. Incense sticks were to be placed at each end of the black table, above which Jeffrey intended to place a large blue lamp with extending blue globe lights. This entire construction was to be placed before a window covered with a black shower curtain, in front of which Jeffrey intended to sit back in a leather chair. So he was going to hang this up, cover the windows so nobody could see, and then he was just going to sit back in his chair and adore his damn skeleton altar. He further described his intended altar as a place for meditation, from where he believed he could draw a sense of power, adding, if this, his arrest, had happened 6 months later, that's what they would have found. They did. The neighbors did complain of smells, Pasty Taco. They sure did. And they complained to the building manager. And I watched the interview with the building manager. He talked to Jeffrey about it. Jeffrey said they would take care of it, that his freezer had went bad, and all the meat in the freezer was what was making it stink. And he also had some tropical fish die. Also, Jeffrey was getting ready to be evicted from this apartment because the manager was tired of this smell. He had talked to Jeffrey about it several times. He gave Jeffrey a chance to, clean out the freezer before the smell was allegedly coming from. He never did do that, so Jeffrey was getting ready to be evicted. This is left out a lot, guys. It's like Dahmer's just got so much information. Sorry. Okay. On July 25th, 1991, Jeffrey was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. By August 22nd, he had been charged with a further 11 murders committed in the state of Wisconsin. On September 14th, investigators in Ohio have uncovered hundreds of bone fragments in the woodland behind the address in which Dahmer had confessed to killing his first victim. Oh gosh, my dog's going to start crying. Um, They found two molars and a vertebrae, and x-ray records showed that they were Stephen Mark Hicks's bones. 3 days later, Dahmer was charged by authorities in Ohio with the murder of Stephen Hicks. Dahmer was not charged with the attempted murder of Tracy Edwards, nor with the murders of Stephen Tuomi. I don't know how you say that right. Tuomi, I think. He was not charged with Stephen's murder because the Milwaukee County District Attorney only brought charges where murder could be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And Dahmer had no memory of actually committing this particular murder. Oh, that is the murder where he said he blacked out and woke up and the guy was dead and he hadn't intended to kill that guy. I left out some information when talking about that was his second murder. When he actually went and bought a suitcase to get the body out of the Ambassador Hotel. That was the name of the hotel. Come on, Skylar. My dog's crying. I had her locked out of my room. So Jeffrey's trial began January 30th, 1992. He was tried in Milwaukee for 15 counts of first-degree murder before Judge Lawrence Graham. By pleading guilty on January 13th to the charges brought against him, Jeffrey had waived his rights to an initial trial to establish guilt, as defined in the Wisconsin law. The issue debated by opposing counsel at Dahmer's trial was to determine whether he suffered from either a mental or a personality disorder. And I can tell you what he suffered from. Let me scroll back up here. I just saw that. I think he has a borderline personality disorder. Okay, let me get back to where I was at. Dogs, quit smacking. On February 15th, the court reconvened to hear the verdict. Dahmer was ruled to be sane and not suffering from a mental disorder at the time of the 15 murders for which he was tried. Although in each count, 2 of the 12 jurors signified their dissent. On the first 2 counts, Dahmer was sentenced to life in prison plus 10 years, with the remaining 13 counts carrying a mandatory sentence of life imprisonment plus 70 years. The death penalty was not an option for Judge Graham to consider at the penalty phase, as the state of Wisconsin had abolished capital punishment in 1853. Upon hearing of Dahmer's sentencing, his father Lionel and his stepmother Sherry requested to be allowed in a 10-minute private meeting with their son before he was transferred to Columbia Correctional Institute in Portage to begin his sentence. This request was granted, and the trio exchanged hugs and well wishes before Jeffrey was escorted away to begin his sentence. 3 months after his conviction for 15 murders in Milwaukee, Jeffrey was extradited to Ohio to be tried for the murder of his first victim, Stephen Hicks. In a court hearing lasting just 45 minutes, Jeffrey again pleaded guilty to the charges and was sentenced to a 16th term of life imprisonment on May 1st, 1992. Now, I have watched some interviews with Lionel Dahmer and Jeffrey Dahmer after he was sentenced to prison, and I found something very interesting. When they were asked if, they ever talked about the murders, if Jeffrey ever talked about the murders, no, he never talked about the murders with his father on those prison visits. I mean, I don't know. They were kind of a weird family, anyways. My diagnosis: F, not curable, must destroy. Yeah. Bye, Lisa. Have a good day. Thanks for stopping in. Yeah, I got to get going here in a little bit too. I've got some stuff to do. I got to get some Christmas shopping done. A little bit. My electric bill totally has messed up my Christmas shopping. Have any of y'all got high electric bills? My electric bill was $500, y'all. I kid y'all not. I think my mom's went up a little bit too. That's a lot though. Okay, back to Jeffrey Dahmer. Let me see what the. Okay, so one psychiatrist said he killed those men because he wanted to kill the source of his homosexual attraction to them. In killing them, he killed what he hated about himself. It makes a lot of sense. Jeffrey, hey, 420 scrapping. Jeffrey Dahmer didn't want to be gay. You know, I, I think some wires were definitely crossed in Jeffrey's mind when he was going through puberty and all this. Okay, a psychiatrist by the name of Friedman testified that it was a longing for companionship that caused Dahmer to kill. He stated Mr. Dahmer is not psychotic. He spoke kindly of Jeffrey, describing him as amiable, pleasant to be with, courteous, with a sense of humor, and handsome and charming. He was and still is a bright young man. He diagnosed Dahmer with a personality disorder not otherwise specified, featuring borderline obsessive compulsive, and sadistic traits. Hold on, Skylar. We're talking about Jeffrey Dahmer, Doc. Calm down. My dogs, they're good for about an hour, guys. And then after about an hour, they're ready for me to get out of this chair and mess with them. I'm trying to find when when he was in prison, how things went. I can never remember the guy that killed Jeffrey in prison. Lady's got something chewing on it. Lady, give me that, please. What is that? Oh, that's a seashell. Give me that. That fell off my turtle. Okay, so Christopher Scarver, well, he was born in 1969. He was a convicted murderer who is best known for his fatal assault on serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer in 1994. And I believe that he beat Jeffrey to death in a bathroom. I think they were supposed to be in there cleaning. Oh, Pugs told me the name. Thanks, girl. I am so bad with names. Mel, what's he going to say? Yeah, Dad, I cooked up a penis soup. Gosh, I mean, Jeffrey was really sick. I mean, he would stand over those bodies before he dismembered them and masturbate. And, you know, as he continued to murder, he just added more and more stuff like, eating the organs and the heart. And like, who in their right mind could like deflesh a body, as they call it? So sick. Jesse Anderson was in the bathroom cleaning and Dahmer was in a closet. Oh, really? I remember when he was murdered and it was all over the news. Y'all need to go watch Jeffrey Dahmer's interviews. I mean, he just seemed like a normal person. If you didn't know what he was doing, he wasn't talking about the murders he committed. I mean, he just seemed like a nice person. Actually, the people at the gay bathhouses and bars, they described Jeffrey as being a honey, very good looking, someone that they would like to take care of. But Jeffrey didn't want that. He didn't want someone that was alive. Jeffrey was totally against anal sex. Like, he had done it a couple times. He didn't like it. And plus, he wanted to be pleased. He didn't want to have to take care of someone else's needs. He didn't want to please someone else. So he liked them unconscious or dead. So strange. I know about the Donner Party, Andrew. I just watched a documentary about that. They really didn't. They were going to starve to death. I've been watching about cannibalism lately, y'all. I watched some weird stuff. Post-mortem photography. All that. I promise I'm not crazy. It's just, I've always been interested in true crime. My granny was the same way. She's not so much into true crime as she used to be. But that's really who got me started on it. Andrew hiding with Michael Jackson. Yeah, Michelle. He was trying to make a sex slave. Dahmer realized, it was a lot of trouble getting rid of the bodies and stuff. So he came up with that idea of drilling a hole in someone's head, making them a sex slave, totally submissive to him. I just love Feisty Taco's name. Like, I can never come up with cute names like that. I like Pugs' name too. Oh, so Jeffrey was getting out cleaning supplies from the closet. Okay, I see what you're saying, Pugs. Well, guys, thank you all for chatting with me. As you can hear, I got a dog that wants my attention, so I'm going to get off here. Hope you all have a great day. I'm going to try to get some daggone Christmas shopping done today. And tomorrow we're going to play some more Christmas trivia and have some fun. We can't always be talking about gruesome murders. Oh, Feisty Taco. My daughter came up with it. Well, it's really cute. Verbal. Hey, my name is old news now. Oh, Verbal. Still love your name. Well, bye, guys. Y'all have a great day. Peace. See y'all tomorrow for trivia.